Hello, my name is yeah. Hi, Panagotis. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
All good, thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah,
And
thank you, and
good,
welcome to the webinar.
thank you.
Yeah, so I guess people are joining. Let's maybe give it a minute or so.
Mhm.
Briefly, and I think by the time people are joining, let me introduce myself. So my name is Bharat Kumar. I'm the founder and CEO of Digital API. My background, and I used to work with a company called Apigee, which got acquired by Google later. For the last 5 years, at Digital API, we've been working with large banks and insurances, to basically transform their entire API infrastructure to be at least for the initial part of the 2020 to help banks and insurances to transform their API infrastructure to more API experiences, developing marketplaces, partner experiences, etc. And that's predominantly what our journey has been so far. And I think for the last 2 years we've been looking at how APS will going to change the banking landscape in their AI transformation, and then still the APIs will going to play a key role there. So that's what we've been doing. Yeah, so that's my background. So yeah, over to you, Panagotis. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Bharat. Very nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm Panagiotis. I probably have a difficult name that people it's not easy to pronounce. So I've been working in financial services for the past many years, and have gone all the way from, let's say, from banking, traditional banking, to payments, to fintech, always on the business side. A combination between strategy, business, product, corporate, and business development. And I mean, I usually say that I have let's say I'm lucky enough to have been on both sides of the fence. So I also understand the challenges. So, you have banks, you have fintechs, you have all kinds of payment players, and sometimes it's not easy to understand the challenges of the other parties. So if you have been there, it's kind of easier.
Hmm.
I'm heading corporate and business development for a payments and fintech company called Unzer.
Hmm.
And very nice to be here. I think the topic that we're discussing today is probably one of the most interesting topics that I can think of nowadays.
Yeah.
So we will be explaining APIs and how they influence the landscape that we see changing, especially in terms of AI.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Again, thanks for joining and welcome to the webinar. Great to have you. Great to get this time from you and then talk about some of the changing transformation that is happening across banking, insurance, especially banking. And I think the what I want to do is talk about how the evolution of AI, and also probably talk about how banks are evolved as organizations in terms of from legacy core. But I think but before that, I think like, if you look at the whole predictive AI, where it started, there's a huge amount of data that was used to analyze different risks, different churn, etc., and things like that. And from there on, it went to producing reports, texts, and now we are in a completely different waters of agents. And now much more beyond that, there's going to be a multi-agent systems. Now, how will this going to change the banking landscape, and then from of course a lot of banks have used the predictive AI and then huge analytics platforms, and I think from there on it's going to be a big leap of transformation. It's going to happen over a period of time, and then want to hear about your thoughts how this you have seen this evolution. Yeah.
Actually, I think you're making a great point, because if you
Mhm.
look at the evolution, I think most people, or let's say many people, they tend to think that the
Yeah.
evolution is starting from when we started discussing about Gen AI a couple of years ago, but it's not the case. I mean, banks have been building predictive AI models for years, maybe for decades, right? I mean, especially what you mentioned in terms of the fraud detection. So basically,
Mhm.
what you do is that you use historical data to flag unusual activity, or you build, for example, credit risk models that predict the likelihood of default. This has been happening for quite a long time. And
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly, a few years ago, I mean, as you said, we went to the Gen AI wave, and basically now we have tools that are generating personalized reports. I mean, it's a tool basically that is able to produce text, reports, code, and that's the big change.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think what happened, as you said, is that we have gone. Agents are, I would say, a big disruption driver because they are. I think what they bring basically is the this. They're not static; they're dynamic. They evolve, right? So and this makes a huge difference. And basically, the autonomy so they have the autonomy to plan and to act. This is what makes a huge difference. And now imagine, because you talked about the multi-agent systems, that you have a team of agents and they're able to act as a team, right?
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
so this is for me the big transformation driver, and that is why the discussion is focusing on the agents.
Yeah.
And I think we need to say, maybe you tell me your opinion, how you think that the agents are changing, let's say, the what is the main challenge for banks in terms of the
Yeah.
agents?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, to go from how the agents will going to evolve, and I think but before that, I think if you just look at how banking has evolved from 25 years ago or 30 years ago, from how they were operating as a bank, from legacy cores, from I still hear there are cores operating on AS400 machines, and then now the middleware, the integration, the iPaaS environments, kind of took over for the last 20 years, from Oracle, IBMs of the world, the ESBs, predominantly, acted, the integration layer. And then also after the integration and the big digital transformation happened, with the mobile revolution, and everything needs to be accessed over a mobile. And then the customers were not just looking to do the banking over the bank's application, but they also wanted banks to be present across different third party payment channels, different commerce, e-commerce. So wherever they go, they have to see end up with doing the transaction. And I think fundamentally this transformation was predominantly carried out by APIs. And as part of this, as banks know, there's a huge APIs, number of APIs have been built, right? So imagine from here on, with all the traditional APIs that are being built, and how do you kind of bring the intelligence, and how do you go to the AI native banking? And I think this is where the transformation, the agentic era will begin. Like I said, I'm guessing that we were in 2025. We are at the peak, the saturation of the APIs that organizations have built. And I think I would call it as all the traditional APIs that are being built will going to be become the foundational aspects for the agentic era, right? Uh, and like I said, there's going to be a lot of governance. There's going to be a lot of that are needed for banks to start looking at their APIs, looking at the data. I think the data and the APIs will going to be the key important drivers for the agentic banking or AI native banking, I would say. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah.
I think Bharat, we need to maybe elaborate on this point because I think this is very crucial. As you said, I mean, most banks, if we look at what has been at the evolution, most banks build their APIs primarily for compliance. I mean, if you think, for example, about I don't know, PSD2, open banking, so they didn't build this for AI. And typically, these APIs are,
Mhm.
let's say, transactional and quite narrow. I mean, for example, you use an API to expose account balances, or let's say
Yeah.
to initiate a payment, or to access KYC endpoints. But they're not optimized for real-time data streams or contextual insights or the
Mhm.
large-scale data integration that you need with AI systems. So,
Yeah.
and on top, I think most of them you see APIs sitting on top of legacy core systems, right?
Mhm.
And now you have, as you explained, we have the AI era. And the question is, are these APIs able to address the needs of AI? And I mean, I think the answer is clearly no. So the question is, it's not about the discussion that we're not going to have to use APIs. APIs are here to stay. The question is, how do you adjust the APIs? How do you adjust the architecture to be able to address the needs of agents and of AI today, right? And I think we need to discuss about the latency, for example. We need to discuss about the data access. We need to discuss about the fragmentation. We need to discuss
Yeah.
about the context, about the metadata. I think this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think the banks, like I said, the most large banks organizations are in the peak of their journey. Probably in the final stages of getting their APIs extended to beyond to their own applications. And I think a lot of this were regulatory driven. Banks were focused. Especially the large part of the Europe were forced to adopt the OPSD to or UK's OBIE, open banking. And I think it also led to the lot of bigger transformation. The open banking, is still being seen as a widely successful, across the Europe. It solved a number of, payments. A lot of fintechs, were founded, on this, as a base. And I think from here on, I think the banks, must focus on, how this the API, ecosystem needs to be organized, and API, the infrastructure, traditional APIs itself, need to be fundamentally transformed for any sort of ecosystem transformation. They want to bring the third-party ecosystems, and I think I keep hearing there are still banks struggling to find that API for a loan application or a KYC integration. So I think the internal landscape still needs to be fixed before they start taking the big leap of AI transformation. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
so
Mhm. Sorry,
sorry.
as you
Go ahead.
say, just to intervene, I think this is a mentality change for the banks, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they need to go from compliance APIs to intelligent APIs. So they need
Yes.
to move beyond the minimum because so far, I think many banks have been doing basically the minimum, and now they need
Yeah.
to go beyond, and they need to understand why this makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
that the compliance is no longer something that is addressing the market.
Correct. No, I think yeah, that's a great quote. I think we should use that from compliance APIs to intelligence APIs. So that's the transformation which we need to stick on. Great. I think with that interesting topics, let's move on to some of the topics that we keep hearing in conferences and in roundtables and everywhere, and mostly I think the agentic use cases that are being seen, if at all, once banks are ready, with their AI governance. And I think the every department, every line of businesses are looking to leverage AI, right? To do what? So one is obviously, to fix a lot of internal things, from fraud detection to portfolio management, to KYC, and also, basically distributing loans, loan approvals across different third-party channels, onboarding, a customer, signing up, from, integrating with a DocuSign instead of, signing up manual papers, manual signature. So I've back in India, even I've seen a couple of months ago, I've seen signing up a lot of papers. There were some banks, they were using DocuSign. So all of this, the banks are still stuck with this and automating some of this digital transformation, digitizing the whole transformation. But I think once this happens, it's going to open up a plethora of the use cases for banks to look at it. What do you think? What have you been hearing about this use cases?
I mean, for me, what's interesting is that if I look at the use cases that you have here, I think they are kind of impacting everything. So they go from the front end all the way to the back end, and then also addressing in between the operational side. So, for example, you say, I mean, you have here the fraud detection. So you have agents spotting, for example, suspicious activity, and then they cut fraud losses and improve trust if they do it well. Or you have, let's say, the credit checks being automated. Or because you mentioned previously, I think the mass, so agents working together. So imagine now if you need to onboard a client. If you're a bank, I need to onboard either a client, either let's say a business client or a consumer. And you
mm,
know there is a sequence of events that need to happen to take place for this
mm,
onboarding to finish. So imagine if you have now a series of agents and they are
mm,
basically coordinating on their own as a
mm,
team. So let's say imagine that I am, as we would have a person coordinating other persons to each one to do a task so that the onboarding can be completed. So now this will be done by agents, a team of agents, and they will just have the goal of finishing the onboarding, and this will be
mm,
done. I mean, for me, this
mm,
is truly making a difference. And this is an
mm,
example that is happening, let's say, on the operational side, but it's not only the case. So imagine
yeah,
how much of the, I mean, traditionally, I would say the problem of the banks was that, I
mm,
mean, when you had branches, you could
mm,
talk to the customers, so you could personalize the offers, right? Now
mm,
we have gone away from the branches, but still there
mm,
is a need to personalize the offers. So
mm,
you need to mass personalize. And I think for me, this is a bit of a contradiction because mass is a bit
mm,
of an antithesis to the personalization. And now the
mm,
banks, they have a tool to do that. And this tool is called AI and the agents. So now you have the agents, and each agent can practically customize and talk to a
mm,
client and understand their needs and
mm,
provide an offer. So this is an example how you change the
yeah,
front end.
yeah,
Uh, and then we're going to discuss, of course, about the backend because you need to adjust the APIs. But
mm,
I think what we see from the use cases, and as you said before, is that this is touching on the basically on everything, on every aspect of how a bank should operate, and this is what we need to understand as a main takeaway here.
yeah. No, that's very interesting, what you said, right? So the agents, have an autonomous capability to make decisions, right? So if you just take about, fraud detection, and I think, we have a huge sources of data, and I think, all of this data is basically available, let's say, there are multi-agent systems working to detect fraud. So one agent is detecting a fraud, the other agent is validating it, and the
Mhm.
third agent is probably even, going and, sending notifications, right? And then with notifications, the fourth agent, is going to further validate it, probably with a human intervention. And then the fourth agent is basically taking an action, right? So there's still going to be some actionable insights. I still believe the multi-agent systems, can be truly autonomous, without any human intervention or an actionable, actions. But I think a lot of this is going to be transformed, like I said, fundamentally, if you go to a bank and each department, or like a KYC, or a wholesale, or a retail, or a transaction, or a foreign exchange, right? Each of these, line of businesses has, have sitting on a lot of APIs, right? And then I think the fundamental, the question is, are all these APIs discoverable? Are all these APIs, are AI ready? Are all these APIs, agent ready? Okay. And I think that's a first question, that a bank needs to, probably do an audit internally, or go to each department. Hey, can I find your APIs? Do you have the metadata? Is this API well documented? If Because AI don't understand, or models don't understand, an undocumented, or probably, poorly, developed APIs. And I think, it has to go through a series of compliance checks. It has to go through a series of, security checks before even, it can be ready, agent ready. So I think, like I said, there are very interesting use cases that are out there. There have been a lot of conversation, but I think the fundamentally it all goes back to, like, what must banks do in order for this transformation to be ready, right? Uh, so what do you think? I think, is this going to be something very interesting? The banks has to look at it. Like I said, every transformation that banks have gone through, and I think, this is I would call it as a AI first API design transformation, or AI AI transformation, for the APIs, and the whole API infrastructure has to be ready uh, for for the partner ecosystem, starting with that, because that is still, the banks are still looking to do marketplaces, build ecosystems. But beyond that, there's going to be a really big, target for banks to, bring autonomous capabilities, right?
I mean, exactly this. I think we need to explain that because here not a lot, but I think I've heard it a couple of times that now that we have, let's say, the agents and the AI, APIs are something that we don't need to continue investing in. And it's exactly the opposite, right? I mean, if you don't have APIs in a way that is addressing the needs that we explained before of the agents, so real time, you have the metadata, they can access, let's say, they are not fragmented, then you're basically not able to build on what needs to happen today. And I think this is the real message that we need to deliver today. I mean, banks, they need to invest in modern APIs, and
Mhm,
these APIs are the ones unlocking the use cases. So, for example, the instant fraud detection. I mean, we mentioned before, if the
mhm,
APIs are not real-time capable, then this is not meeting the needs of the agents, because basically the agents are not waiting. Uh,
mhm,
I mean, they cannot wait for 15, 20, 60 minutes.
mhm,
They need everything that happens needs to be real time, right? So you need to go from again, from the static mentality, you need to go to
mhm,
this dynamic mentality. And this includes very much the
mhm,
APIs. And this is only when you can truly have this hyper personalization, this experience, right? So the banks that are not able to do this, the banks that are not able, that will not be able to, let's say, adjust their APIs as needed, they're not going to
mhm,
be able to play the AI game. And I think this should be the core message. And I think it makes
mhm,
sense maybe for us to explain how you do this and
mhm.
what exactly this takes. But for me, it's that should be the core message here.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on some of the topics that you talked about, the personalization, everything happens unless you have you know actionable insights or obviously the banks has two the major infrastructure. One is a data infrastructure, one is the API infrastructure, right? So from data and APIs, how they are going to fundamentally transform the customer experience, the personalization that's going to happen, and I think probably that's going to be the first end users and experiences how everything becomes personalized to them based on obviously it all goes back to the data governance GDPR and the compliance, right? So and I think if there is the governance that could come in, a regulatory that could probably how models, AI models can be used on the bank's data, on the customer data. Like I said, it fundamentally, the bank has to go through this transformation, through the governance process. Once it happens, I think they will all go back to look at two major things. So one is the data infrastructure, and then the API infrastructure, right? So this whole infrastructure needs to be fundamentally transformed in order for them to securely and also uh, I think the agents, before the agents and AI, I think there's a lot of trust that needs to be built, especially with AI, right? So it has to be very, very, focused. That's something that shouldn't get out of the hands. I think we still see the guardrails, the hallucinations. There's still a lot of governance products that are being built, through AI gateway. But still, there's a huge amount of chunk that needs to happen before banks could start looking at agentic use cases. But I think like I said, with this time frame, with this gap, before the mainstream agentic platforms and everything becomes ready for banks, and I think they have two things to fix. One is that, of course, data infrastructure, and then the APIs, and of course both the entire set of data and the line of businesses, everything is available via APIs. So they need to look at and streamline their operations. Yeah.
And I think, Bharat, what we need to say is that, let's say, the better the organization of the APIs,
Mhm.
the better the outcome of the, let's say, agentic and AI setup for banks is going to be. So if you have better APIs, everything is going to work better. If the APIs are not there, then the
Mhm.
outcome you mentioned about the hallucinations, about the models not producing what they should
Yeah.
be producing, then the outcome is not going to be that great. So the basis should be there.
Yeah. 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 Cool. I think if you look at, I think I ended my previous slide talking about how banks needs to be fundamentally transformed, for this leap of a big transformation, and that is going to come in there next few years. And I think that the first fundamental thing we as a company, what we do is help your get your API landscape. Like I said, we fundamentally help you to transform your API landscape, from identifying these APIs, where these APIs are basically deployed, going to the sources of these APIs, getting your API landscape in place, and getting the the catalog in place, right? So, and then I think a lot of these a lot of banks, I think what we are also seeing is the MCP is kind of has bought back APIs now back to, like I said, has given another life, because MCP is going to be a bridge between the models and the AI, and also between APIs, right? So but is the MCP ready? Are organizations ready? But maybe I think, yeah, it's ready for the mostly internal querying use cases, etc. Just to understand what this API does. I think that's mostly limited to it now. When you turn an API into MCP, deploy to an MCP server securely, locally, right, and also with an MCP gateway, that still operates under your boundary. You can still, I think, the API scale, the scale of the APIs, like I said, there are thousands of APIs that are being built, but are those discoverable? Like, are those cataloged well, right? Come and can somebody come and search for these APIs, within your organization, across even a single department, right? If that is happening, and then probably the next step for banks to do is look at, can they build an MCP gateway, MCP layer in front of it, right? So what do you think? This is have you been hearing about MCP banks, APIs? Are there any some active conversations?
Yes, I mean, I would like to comment on your example because I'm not sure if we understand well enough that organizations, let's say banks, they have APIs, but not everyone knows how many APIs they have, what is the taxonomy, what each one does, right? So I think companies like you is that they are basically the added value, and this is a very huge benefit, is that they help organize the APIs. So being able, so if I'm a user, for example, if I am within the organization and I need to understand, do you have an API for this? Maybe we have, maybe we don't. But if the search outcome is a good one, then I don't have to go asking around, okay, this is what I need to do. Is there an API to do it? Do we have the data points? Is it connected? How it works, right? So that's why I think we need to stress that having this internal taxonomy in terms of how APIs are working is very, very crucial uh, because then it makes it easy for you to design, to launch the APIs and to get the APIs and connect them to whatever, let's say, systems and partners need to be connected with to produce the outcome that you need to have.
Correct. Yeah. Let me talk about, I think one of the leading UK transformation, that we helped, the last 3 years, right? And I think for the sake of, the privacy and security, we've, not taking the company's name out, but I think it's one of a leading UK bank. And I think, they're probably, present across 65 markets. And I would say they're sitting across like, in excess of, 20,000 APIs, etc. I think 4 years ago when we engaged with them, I think the like I said, the APIs for the last 10 years, APIs have led the digital transformation, and these APIs are present across different API infrastructure environments like Apigee, MuleSoft, Amazon. And then I think they are also running, different API portals to onboard their, third party, customers. And I still see, there are banks, who are having, different API developer portals, to publish their APIs for their partners, etc. And I think, the two problems here. So one is the partners and developers, getting kind of, pointed out to different API experiences. That is one. And also, these API infrastructures, basically it's all end of the day, it's APIs for the banks, but they were operating under the big silos. I think the operating under silos, different line of businesses is probably, going to be, but I think today, one of the interesting team that we worked with came together and decided, look, we as a bank, if we had to transform the whole API infrastructure, the whole API transformation needs to happen. And I think the whole API infrastructure transformation needs to happen, only, if we have one central team, who can, look anything that happens on the APIs, we need to have that catalog. Okay. If that is the mandate, that if that gets, message sent over to all the line of businesses, whoever has the API infrastructure, I think one central team, architecture team, or a central IT, I would say, is responsible for maintaining the library of the entire organization's APIs. So once it happens here, I think you can clean your APIs, make it well documented, metadata information, taxonomy information, run compliance, run linting checks, run a data checks, do everything, before you make this API available to your partner ecosystem. Okay. So this needs to happen, no matter what, irrespective of what API platform you're running, irrespective of what, AI API tools that you're running, you need to, transform your, the API infrastructure into an experience, into a hub infrastructure where, and I think fundamentally, if you look at all these APIs were being developed by different teams, different developers, right? But I think it's when it goes to a central IT, it becomes an architect or a product owner's headache to actually fix this, right? So it's his job to make sure this API goes to the right partners, this API goes to a right team, this API goes to the right internal team, right? And I think this is what we believe as a fundamentally transformed the one of our client that has used our products. And I think this is the same. I can go on with a few examples of insurance and fintechs. But what is your experience, Benagotis? Have you seen similar transformations? Yeah.
I mean, for me, before I go to the transformations, I think I wanted to comment on the following. I mean, if you look at the amount of money that banks are spending on digital transformation, which is basically, nothing more than how much money they spend on the core banking systems and how much money they spend on maintaining this, it doesn't make sense not to spend at least a very small portion of this money to make sure that your APIs are working. Because this is your internal connectivity, but most importantly, this is your connectivity to your partners and to your clients. So if
Mhm.
your connectivity is not working, if the rails are not working, then you don't have, let's say, the roads. So imagine if you are living in a building and the road is in a very poor condition, so you cannot walk across to the other building. I think for me this is exactly the same analogy with having an API that's not working well. You cannot cross the street and go to the other building who is, let's say, you're going to find your partners, your business partners or whatever. So this is for me the analogy. And I mean, in my experience, I see that maybe banks initially they might be a bit hesitant in terms of, okay, why do we need the tool for the APIs? But once they understand how much time and energy they save by being able to manage better their APIs, this is eye-opening. I mean, I've seen it a couple of times. And it's basically people. I mean, if you ask the product people, if you ask, let's say, the people that really deal with the APIs, they're going to tell you why this makes sense. But if you go, let's say, onto the business side, if you go maybe a few layers above, then they don't have the same understanding. But the outcomes, and maybe you can talk a bit about the outcomes. I think this is also what has been changing the mind of people. I don't know, in your experience, the use cases that you have been mentioning, um, have you seen, let's say, the senior leadership changing their mind once they see the outcomes, once they see metrics, what
Mhm.
this taxonomy organization has done, and what was the impact on the organization?
No, I think I think the transformation what we have seen in our organizations, right? So especially the client that we've worked with, I think they have seen at least what we hear is the from the external marketplaces and all the partners that they onboarded. I think has fundamentally transformed banks to be present at different channels, omni-channel experiences, and also ecosystem experiences that has improved a lot. And of course, the bank's partnership, timeline has improved tremendously, significantly, improved time, the onboarding times, especially. What it used to take like 3 or 6 months to, or for someone to give them access to a well-documented APIs, or even, from access perspective, from also integration perspective, from discovery to subscribing and also testing the APIs as come as a transform fundamentally. So one is this onboarding, and then building the experiences for third parties. Sorry. But I think the major transformation is the integration time, right? Once the integration time is done, it reduced to like what it used to be 3 months to 3 weeks, through a by building a great developer experience. But before then, by sanitizing and cleaning the complete APIs, within in-house. And I think that's where we've seen, we have heard, banks have literally seen the huge value, not just value, but also a real outcome, a real ROI, with their AP infrastructure, what they've invested for the last 10 years. Yeah. Mhm.
And if I may add, I mean, talking to banks, I mean, some of them, or at least a lot of them, they
Yeah.
are basically saying that we would like to play the platform game. They would
Mhm.
like to go on to marketplace, etc. How can you
Mhm.
play this game if you don't have APIs that are able to
Correct.
service to
Yeah.
have a to service this correctly? So for me, this is the basis for a lot of
Yeah.
things, not only on
Yeah.
the product side and the IT side that you have been mentioning, but also on the outcome side, on the business side.
Correct. Yeah. No, I think with that, I would just like to give you a quick glimpse of what our APS service hub looks like. Like I said, right? So banks have been sitting on a different infrastructure, and then if you look at we developed this product over the last 4 years, keeping in mind that banks will continue to operate on different API environments, API deployments, and they will continue to have different API sources, not just API gateways. Okay, and also they will continue to have APIs, beyond like in form of microservices, in form of events, in the form of different GraphQL services, etc. Right? So I think the project Helix, what we thought is of course having a lightweight API gateway, which kind of brings that one layer. One wrapper around all your APIs, right? So it basically solves a problem of you are, let's say I'm running MuleSoft, I'm running Kong, and I'm running an Apigee or or even a cloud gateway. So I think the combination today in the market is you have a one legacy iPaaS environment. On top of it, you have a cloud native Kong, Azure, or Axway, or even I would say AWS gateways, right? So the gateways I think predominantly gave a lot of high pass companies to so to basically from integration, how they kind of took over that API market, API gateway market. But still, underneath, it's all integration that is still running. But I think if you go to some of the large fintechs, or even the like I said, we thought this is going to be a bank's problem, but today this is are going to be like a retail problem, fintech problem as well, because they have APIs everywhere. And I think that's where it makes sense to have one gateway, and also to have a one control plane, but also having that multi gateway instance manager, to looking at how API how many API instances you're running, how many API environments you're running, right? So in one API hub, and also like I said, this is going to be an API estate. Look at your entire API estate, and also look at marketplace as well, and control everything from gateway to API estates, and also to analytics, from one single environment. So let's look at some of the intelligence that we have built here, right? So the intelligence that we talk about is basically turn your API, internal APIs, into MCP, and securely host it, and with our MCP gateway called Helix, like I said, and then start interacting with your APIs directly. Okay. So like I said, so this is going to be give you the every bank with every banks has their APIs. At the same time, once you connect all of these APIs and look at import APIs from different sources, we've seen companies, like I said, not only the APIs present deployed in the API gateways, but they're also sitting across different Postman collections, sitting across GitHub, etc. So we keep writing integration to source these APIs wherever they are. Once you have this portfolio under your estate, you can see, you can tag it with different domains, different business verticals, and then based on that, you can also filter it, see which APIs do you want to see, and what business area, who has access to what APIs internally. Okay. So once this is done, you can find look at the APIs that you want, and also basically, once you go into any of the specific API, you can run generate documentation, you can run all the compliance checks here, look at duplication, look at the security aspect of it, and then basically publish it to the external portal. Okay. Now, when it comes to external portal, you can have a basic portal, where let's say you want to give internally, or even there is a you don't need you're not looking at a very serious API marketplace kind of experience, but you're still looking for a basic developer portal. You can still do that. Publish your APIs, publish your documentation. But if you are really serious about onboarding a third parties, and and that is that scale, then you probably need most advanced marketplace aspects. Like I said,
But
yes,
maybe here it's worth saying that, I mean, exactly this is the example that you're now mentioning, is when I'm a bank and I want, let's say, to expose my APIs for
yeah,
developers or third parties to build added value on top of the APIs. This is the tool to publish the APIs and to see, to control and to see, what exactly do I want to publish and how do I do
correct.
it.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, right? So basically, fundamentally, you're connecting to all your API sources. This is a API transformation, hub, I would say. This is where you catalog all the APIs at one place, connect to all of your API gateways in from one single control plane, and then catalog it, and then run a complete compliance, taxonomy checks, metadata checks, security checks, and everything in one place. And once you're happy with it, now you can go publish in an external marketplace, okay? Or you can publish in a basic portal. So basically, the basic portal is something available for internally, okay? Let's say a retail APIs want to consume fraud detection APIs, or or a foreign exchange APIs, right? So then they can go into look into the that particular retail portal, which is basically still an internal portal, okay?
Mhm.
But I think just the business domain, which kind of gives you the it's a retail portal, it's a for a wholesale portal, it's a or let's say I have a different bank subsidiary, right? And I can look at their portal as well, right? So you can still have this micro portals running, which will document all of your APIs available for internal consumption. At the same time, we're also looking at something called the API GPT. So the API GPT is a very interesting concept. I think what we have done is I think there's a lot of buzz around APIs, right? Correct. Buzz around MCP. Hey, this what is this MCP going to be, right? MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. I think what this protocol does is it makes your API available, for AI model to call it. Okay, AI
Mhm.
model to use it, right? So what that means is, because AI model, is basically it's a lot of data, and then a lot of data has been trained, and then it cannot make a live, if it has to look something, let's say, like 2 years ago, what is the weather in I don't know in London today, right? Whether it's going to be in London next week. So it needed the context. So it needed to call a weather API, retrieve information, and tell that, hey, weather is going to be, so and so range based on this data, right? So imagine that example, the MCP, all your thousands of APIs will become instantly available, internal communication, internal querying, through API GPT, right? So you clean your API, build a taxonomy, build a metadata information, and then deploy to a secure Helix MCP gateway, and then these APIs becomes available for anybody, analyst, right? CIOs, for from business team, anybody can come and ask, hey, give me a list of failed KYCs for the last 7 weeks, right? Hey, give me a fraud reports, and then send me an email, right? So this is probably the first agentic use cases that banks can think of internally, and start looking for information rather than taking actions. Probably I would say this is the first step bank can look at it, understand what these APIs are, what this API does, right? And what kind of applications I can build, right? So because these APIs are deployed with securely, we've solved some of the security problems with MCP, and available purely for internal purpose. Yeah.
And I think it makes sense to explain also that if the
Yeah.
APIs are not working well, then the information is not going to be fetched. So you need to have the information, the APIs connecting to the right data points so that you can have the query working as it should.
Correct. Correct. Cool. I think so. This is some of the AI capabilities of the product. You can look at the data. You can analyze information. You can look at data across API operations, across users, across business, across different verticals, what is happening across different streams. And of course, you can control, who wants to see, what you want to see on the portal hub, right? So this is a very comprehensive, API transformational, hub, I would say. So this is probably every organization would need it to catalog APIs before they can think of, any sort of a distribution. Yeah. Cool. I think I'm at the end of the one of the slide decks, or probably the topics. I think I just want to emphasize again that all the traditional existing infrastructure that has been built over the last 10 years, and I think the banks have a huge opportunity to transform that into a layer two and layer three. Layer two is basically they need to build that intelligence layer from compliance, like what you said, from compliance APIs to intelligent APIs. So this needs to happen first, and then the layer one, layer three is basically they need to build that the a lot of channel experiences. Probably that's going to take in a few years to build that end agentic experiences for the customers. Again, which needs a lot of transformation that needs to happen at layer two, and that's where we kind of operate. And yeah, so what do you think? This transformation needs to happen for bank. I would say API AI transformation. Yeah.
I think it's one of the main changes. I mean, it's one of the main, I mean, it's part of the core transformation that banks need to do. I mean, if you look at the history, I mean, you're going to see that banks have always been doing core digital transformation. I mean, projects that have been spanning years and years, right? So now I think the change is that they're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
change very quickly or faster than they were used to do from the traditional, let's say, core system transformation to AI. And a
Mm-hmm.
very crucial part of this transformation of the AI capable organization is if you have working APIs,
Mm-hmm.
uh, let's say, feeding the stuff that you're building on top. I mean, this layer. So if the APIs are not working, then they're not going to be getting the proper data. So even if you are, let's say, I mean, many banks, let's say, as an example, are trying to build their data uh,
Mm-hmm.
architecture in a way that makes sense. If the API, if the rail is not able to take the data points that you have built properly and move it to the, let's say, to the place that is relevant, then you have not done many things. So that's why I think the banks, they need to realize that the API architecture is a very crucial point of the new transformation that they will have to engage with.
Mm. Very well said. I think with that, I think we're all three minutes over time. But I think I enjoyed the conversation, Panagotis, talking about different things and your thoughts. Yeah. Let's see if there are any questions.
I think we have one question, maybe you can answer it. I mean, I've seen there was a question around if I go to the Q&A, how can agentic AI be used to tackle cyber attacks on banks? I mean, I'm not an expert on cybersecurity, but I would
Mhm.
say you can help me also as well. But that, I mean, the main difference when it comes to agentic AI protecting the
Mhm.
banks is first of all that you have someone watching, let's say, suspicious behavior faster,
Mhm.
and basically you have 24/7, you have an agent and they watch every time. Not only they watch they spot suspicious behavior, but they learn to notice. So basically based on the feedback that they get
Mhm.
better, and then they can
Mhm.
automatically cut off, let's say, suspicious connections or freeze the risky account in seconds because they
Mhm.
know what they need to do. They have instructions, right? So they have the algorithm, and of course they
Mhm.
have, imagine if you have an incident. I mean, that's at least in my experience. Normally, what you do is that you wait for different teams to act. Now, if you have an AI, the AI is carrying out the security steps without having to wait for the teams. So, for example, imagine that you have to change a password because you have a hacker incident, right? I mean, you don't need to look for the person who is able to, who is the admin, for example, to change the password, but the AI is able to do it automatically in seconds. And this sometimes can be very
Mhm.
crucial in terms of saving the day. So I think these are a few examples. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Mhm. No, I think that's a very good question. The cyber attacks, obviously, I think, like I said, lot of this agent use cases will going to be actionable, not just identifying the threats, attacks, but also taking actionable plan. Do we need to I mean, this, like I said, this is going to be the multi-agent system, one agent reporting the cyber attacks, the other agent taking an action. The action can be reporting to a human, or somebody, an analyst, right? And then that analyst will say, these are the actions, take it. And then based on the response, based on the different, the nature of the attacks, there could be an agent that could act on itself, right? I think, like I said, the cybersecurity will going to be, the internal use cases especially, will going to be the first one to be used, for such attacks. I think, for that, fundamentally, there's kind of the banks obviously are running a huge infrastructure, especially identifying and taking actionable insights, or uh, putting more a cloud guardrails, cloud armor kind of approach to to increase more, let's say, blocking certain IPs, right? So the agent will start blocking those IPs already, right? We've seen such attacks on marketplaces, and I think these attacks are usually come with a lot of hundreds and thousands of requests, and we keep blocking it, right? So based on identifying IP, right? So think about this: the agents, identifying these attacks and also blocking these attacks, and then reporting it to you, right? So there's going to be
Yeah.
a multi-agent, but I would say fundamentally, banks wouldn't want to build this. Probably, banks can orchestrate, like what multi-agents, from identifying to taking action. That needs to be orchestrated. That's something that cybersecurity platform can obviously do. I think there's another interesting question from Socrates. No, I think I would like to see, how tier two and tier three banks will tackle these issues. Yeah, I think that's a very good question. In fact, we have worked with tier two, tier three banks. They don't need to spend like how they spent on the lot of iPaaS and API infrastructure. They don't need to spend a lot of money, but I think all we're doing is all you're doing is layer two and layer three. It's not going to cost a lot of money, but the ROI is, I think, what is missing is because you have invested so much on the API infrastructure, there's no real ROI like MuleSoft or Kong. The real ROI begins only when you start building experiences, building intelligence around these APIs that is already built for the last few years. Yeah.
But I would argue to your last point and to the question about the tier two and tier three banks, that actually the benefit that these banks are getting from the from getting the API landscape correct is much better, because imagine that they are getting flexibility, and
Mhm.
flexibility in this case it means that they don't have to have a very heavy IT spend. So for example, they can plug into external services and systems through the APIs, and they
Mhm.
can also increase the efficiency they have, right? So they automate manual work, and so the smaller banks, they have much more, they have a bigger need to do all these things correctly, because they have, so the return, the return on investment is it's probably going to be much bigger once this landscape is in place. So I would argue that for smaller banks,
Yeah.
it's probably an efficiency gain, and
Mhm.
it allows them to be more competitive out on the market with
Mhm.
much bigger players, that they have other resources that these smaller players cannot afford.
Correct. There's another interesting question from Joachim. So do you want to answer that, Panagotis? Yeah.
With designs can use layer 3 as a UX, which frameworks? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's a technical question, right? I don't know if we want to go into this
Yeah.
discussion. I mean, what I can say is, I think the UI experience makes a key difference. I mean, this probably would be my focus here. We can discuss maybe offline what are the frameworks. I mean, again, I'm not a tech expert, but what I've seen working is that the UI, both internally and externally, is making a key difference. If I look back at your, let's say, the presentation of what you're doing, guys, I think it makes a lot of sense. If we go, for example, back to the example of, let's try to understand, I'm looking for a very specific API. I need to be able to type this in a very simple way, and I get the outcome. So this is the internal rail, and then externally, I need to be able. So let's say the developers, the third parties are getting access to my APIs. They need to be able to discover my APIs in a very smooth way. And now with
Mhm.
agents, imagine that the agents they have very specific things that they want to look at. So they need to be discoverable. So your APIs, they need to be able to match exactly the expectations of the agents, because if they don't find the information they're looking for, then they go to the next. So
Correct.
that's why this is crucial.
I think, yeah, that's a very interesting question, what Joachim has asked, right? So on the layer three, yeah, my take is that, predominantly, I think most layer three, marketplaces, the users, were partners, developers, right? It used to be humans. Now imagine there's going to be agents crawling and then looking at understanding your APIs. So the APIs, obviously it has to be well documented. And I've seen marketplaces, having download postman collection. So imagine the agent or or a autonomous agent will not and will not probably call there or run a postman, download a postman, and then test it. Probably that experience needs to be embedded within the marketplace itself, right? Imagine the agent will look at the the APIs, want to test an API, and then boom, that has to be there. So I think for these experiences to come up, I think you need to have Angular or React kind of a technologies to build the layer three, because like I said, the marketplaces, it used to be limited for partners and developers. Now it's going to be the agents probably looking at your APIs, right? And for that, does your marketplace experience cater to that? I think that's a question, most banks needs to answer that. So that for that, that means, you need to have well documented APIs, of course, that's a must. And the second is, those APIs, testable within the same marketplace itself, so that the agents can understand, what is this API this API going to do, right? I think these experiences are going to fundamentally transform the marketplace experience, rather than using more, dropping more tools, within the marketplace. I think that's where it's going to be an interesting, transformation. Yeah, very good.
Excellent.
Cool. I think, like I said, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. If you have any questions, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or Panagotis. Happy to have one-on-one conversations if you would like to deep dive on this. Yeah, Panagotis, thank you so much. Any closing remarks?
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.